Wonderful, and all that discussion of workforce was really good cue up. So a little change in format. Our next speaker is going to be joining us virtually. So while I'm talking, hopefully we'll have that successfully come up behind us. But next up, we have a member of Congress who has really become a key ally in our fight to bridge the gap between the cost of training that we just talked about to become a commercial airline pilot and the financing provided by student loans, because there's a big gap in between. Congressman Danny K. Davis has served the 7th Congressional District of Illinois since 1996. Before his time in public office, Congressman Davis served as an educator, community organizer, health planner, administrator, and civil rights advocate. He has received hundreds of awards and citations for outstanding work in the areas of health, education, human relations, politics, and advocacy, including 6 honorary doctorate degrees from well-known colleges and universities, and he has a BA from Arkansas A&M. He has a master's from Chicago State University and his doctorate from the Union Institute in Cincinnati. In Congress, Representative Davis is a member of the Ways and Means Committee, and he chairs its Worker and Family Support Subcommittee. Congressman Davis is a member of several congressional caucuses, including the Congressional Black Caucus, the Progressive Caucus, the Urban Caucus, the Community Health Centers Caucus, the Congressional Sugar Caucus, the Congressional Caucus on Black Men and Boys, and co-chair of the Congressional Caucus on Reentry. Our Aviation Workforce Coalition began working with the Congressman earlier this year, and he's becoming leading proponent for making the pilot profession, the educational and training path more inclusive and accessible from people from all backgrounds. So Congressman, thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, let me just thank you. And as I listened to all of those things that you said, I was saying to myself, I don't think all of that is really necessary. But it's really a pleasure to have the opportunity to share a few minutes with your association this afternoon. So let me just say to Faye Malarkey Black, President and CEO of the RAA, to Dion Flannery, the Board Chair and President of PSA, and to all of those who have joined in this discussion today. Let me just thank you for inviting me here to the Regional Airline Association's annual meeting. And as I was trying to think of what I was going to say and what I was going to talk about, I thought of my interaction with the aviation industry. I was elected to the United States House of Representatives in 1996. And since then, I've taken an average of 6 flights a month for 21 years. That's 72 flights a year and over 1,500 flights over a 21-year period of time. That's what I call domestic travel. And since then, I've also traveled to at least 20 different countries. And so I've traveled on many airlines. And so one might say that I'm sort of a world traveler. But all of these travels have been related to business. So I've had some experience with air travel from a consumer perspective. And now I am indeed honored to join you and discuss air travel from a policy perspective. Aviation-related companies that make airplanes and fly airplanes are located in my district. United Airlines, Boeing, and other air transport companies have headquarters in my district. And while the industry has made significant gains in technology and diversity, it has not been enough since Bessie Coleman, the first African-American woman, moved to France to obtain her pilot's license, or William J. Powell, the first African-American male to receive a commercial flight license. After his family moved to Chicago from Henderson, Kentucky, he grew up to be an engineer, a soldier, and a professor. He penned a book titled Black Flight, an optimistic view of African Americans in aviation, and he was a hero in the aviation industry. There are others, and of course, the Tuskegee Airmen, who are and continue with extraordinary accomplishments. As a matter of fact, one of my most prized possessions is a jacket that was given to me by the Dodo Club of the Tuskegee Airmen in Chicago. And sometimes I wear it, and whenever I do, someone always walks up to me or something and say, "Thank you for your service," or "Thank you for what you've done." And one young fellow walked up one day and said, Mister, were you one of the originals?" My wife was walking along beside me, and she said, "I told you you was getting old." And I said, no, I was not an original. But the Tuskegee Airmen and other African-American pioneers represent the heroes and sheroes and truly bring to life the hope and aspirations of all people, especially minorities and women who dream of flying with the wind one day. Earlier this year, we created an Aviation and Space Advisory Committee. This group advises me on policy, program, and advocacy efforts that they'd like to see me pursue. And while the salaries are great and the demand is high, according to the U.S. Labor Department's Bureau of Labor Statistics, only 2% of African Americans are pilots in the United States. Minority participation in the aviation industry re-emerged with me and with us from an intern in a flight and educational program, but could not continue because the cost was prohibitive. This young man represents thousands of African Americans, men and women, with a dream to fly, but have not been able to do so. As a result of this interaction, I convened meetings with individuals, organizations, and stakeholders in an effort to identify solutions to the problem. The group decided to research the issues and discovered that in the 1970s, the federal government financially supported flight training through Pell Grants. However, the program was discontinued due to what I guess one could call abuse, or at least that's certainly what we came up with. Although the Pell Grant program was discontinued, the policy issue about creating diversity in the aviation industry continued to plague thousands of young people all over America. Our plan included increasing financial and through Pell Grants and student loans. Pursuing this goal is where our policy goals intersect with the Regional Airline Association, who contacted my office after learning about flight training legislation we were proposing. We're proud to partner with Senator Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin to introduce legislation to address these issues. We are excited that the Regional Airline Association will address these issues today by discussing how to achieve workforce diversity and conducting education, career outreach, and the Future Workforce Panel, which will analyze how to deal with the workforce shortage. I'm not an expert in the airline industry, but I know a little about the workforce. I did not mention that I am also the chair of the Ways and Means Subcommittee on Worker and Family Support. My committee on work and family support has listened to hours upon hours of testimony and read hundreds of reports on how to solve workforce shortage problems and how to get people working in the United States. First, we must be serious about training in an industry that seems almost mystical for some children emerging from marginalized communities. These young people and young adults have the courage, drive, and academic fortitude to fly. Training is the key question of our legislation, and it's the key question our legislation attempts to address. Funding must pay for it. We have the ability, might, and it is the right timing to transform thousands of individuals' lives, thereby changing the trajectory of an entire generation of families and communities. Outreach is another key issue. The FAA has created initiatives to generate interest in the aviation industry. Next month, we will learn directly from the FAA about their progress and how we might help them achieve this goal. Based upon my experiences, mentoring is another critical component. Youth, especially in marginalized communities, need mentors to help them successfully navigate the landscape. And when I talk about marginalized communities, my meaning is not that young people are marginalized intellectually, but they are marginalized economically. Finally, the aviation industry must truly create pathways for minorities and women to access the industry. We have learned that in our country 'tis of thee, we can do anything almost when we are committed to doing it. So I applaud United Airlines, American Airlines, Delta, and other airlines that have created commercial pilots pathways. We must continue to think harder about why only 3.4% of African American males are commercial pilots, and why women, especially African American women, lag so far behind. In the earlier 19th century, Bessie Coleman and William Powell led the way, generated momentum and enthusiasm in the aviation industry for African Americans to follow in their footsteps. We must continue that momentum in our own spaces. I am committed to generating enthusiasm and momentum for our legislation. I urge you to continue to work in this space with us. So I applaud the Regional Airline Association for taking on this task. It's not easy to climb mountains, but as I've learned, and I believe that you know about mountain climbing and climbing high. So let's just climb as high as we possibly can together. I thank you for the opportunity to share this time with you. Have a wonderful afternoon, and it's been a pleasure to be with you.
Oh, thank you so much. We truly appreciate it. And I just, if the Congressman is still watching us, two things I want to reflect. And one is that in our offices, we have a portrait of Bessie Coleman, and it's one of the things that inspires me as a woman in aviation. And also a landmark event happened in the regional industry probably about a decade ago. And that was, we had the first all African-American, all female total airline crew. So the cabin and the flight deck were manned by not men. So something very special in our industry as well. So thank you again to the Congressman. And now I'd like our chair to come up and introduce the next speaker.